Have we got Ed there?
Yes, I have arrived. Sorry, I got caught up in the cyberspace, and so I missed your wonderful introduction, Lisa, but I got the start of it.
It was all good.
I'm sure. But what I did hear was your sort of initial point that this is great. This is a chance to have a bit more of a deep dive into some of the areas, and really excited to hear from the other task forces. But first up is the Precincts and Infrastructure Task Force. And my name is Ed Steen, but I'd like to start just by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are joining this conversation from. I'm joining from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging, and I'd like to extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. For us, acknowledging, recognising, and embracing our city's First Nation history and future is a critical part of our work. We believe that it should form a central part of our circular economy discussion, and the Precincts and Infrastructure Task Force in our work hopefully provides an important context in which to do that. So just quickly, I am the co-chair of the Precincts and Infrastructure Task Force at New South Wales Circular, along with Kate Bringville, who I believe is on the call today as well. I'm also the Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability at the Greater Sydney Commission, and there's a wonderful collaborative relationship between New South Wales Circular and the Greater Sydney Commission. The task force, for those of you who don't know, is an opportunity for those of us working in the space of infrastructure, precincts, cities, sustainability, probably all of us, I guess, in some way or other, to come together to discuss the emerging issues, particularly those associated with the circular economy, how the circular economy can contribute to cities and precincts and infrastructure, and how cities, precincts, and infrastructure can contribute to the circular economy. A circular approach, if you will. And I'd like to thank Siri's involved as well. I'd like to thank the participants in the task force. And look, if it sounds interesting to you, something that's relevant to the work you do, please feel free to reach out to Lisa, myself, or the New South Wales Circular team, and we'd love to discuss further how you can be involved. Anyway, without further ado, on to the really exciting stuff today, which is to talk first, to have some presentations from a number of key stakeholders, key people involved in our task force, and then we'll have a little panel discussion on Western Sydney with two representatives from major projects in the area. So we'll kick on, go straight into the discussions. We're going to have four presentations, sorry, I can't even count. And the first one's going to be from Ellie Abbas and Will Rifkin from USyd and University of Newcastle, respectively. Just quickly, when we talk to Ellie, he is the Professor of Chemical Engineering and the Acting Head of School of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at the University of Sydney. He's also a Director of the Waste Transformation Research Hub. His engineering research is on the area of process systems engineering with an emphasis on model-based optimal operation of particulate, energy, and biosystems. And Will is an emeritus professor at Newcastle University. He is an engineer turned sociologist, having moved from the aerospace industry into the study of communication between technical and non-technical people. That explains why Will can often explain these concepts to me as a non-technical person. He has degrees in physics, engineering and environmental studies, and socio-technical studies. And he has been engaged in consultancy with major commercial and government organisations in both Australia and the US in areas ranging from ethics to planning to management communication capabilities. And it's been a great honour to work with Ellie and Will on their work for the task force. They were successful in getting the rapid review research proposal up, and they're going to tell us a bit more about that research and some of the findings that are relevant to this discussion today. So over to Ellie and Will.
Good morning, Ed. Can you hear me and can you see a screen with the front slide?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much, Ed, for the kind introduction. Good morning to you all. It's good to be with you and to share with you the outcomes of the rapid review on the role of the circular economy in business case processes for precincts and infrastructure.
Ellie, just before you go on, sorry, I think you might want to put into presenter mode.
Right.
We can see your next slide as well.
Right. That's what I thought.
We just have a notification that it's starting screen sharing, but it hasn't come up yet. But if you want, we can deal with the technical issues in the background if you want to kick off and get the slides to augment when they arrive. There we go. Okay, we can. Oh. The ongoing challenge of presentations in the virtual world. Many benefits from it, but this is one of the challenges. Ellie, do you want to just maybe sort of kick off in the presentation and we can try to get them up in the background for you? There we go. Okay, we're good.
How is that now? Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Okay, so I'll quickly give you an outline of the presentation structure. So we'll introduce the team, we'll rehash the rapid review challenge statement. We'll pause for a moment and engage with you, the audience, on a question, and then we'll present to you the structure of the written report, the rapid review that is the subject of the presentation here. And then we also talk a little bit about backgrounds and definitions, which are important in terms of the circular economy and precincts. We'll explain the methods that we've used, the literature review, the case studies involved, and also the executive interviews that we've undertaken. And then we finish off with findings and recommendations. It has been a real pleasure and really good to work with quite a diverse team here. With me, Ali Abbas from the University of Sydney, my co-lead investigator, Professor Will Rifkin. Also, we have Simon Wright and Tim Baines, Tim from CSRO and Simon from UTS. We also have Dylan Gower from Clean Core, and also Professor Vlad Strezov from Macquarie University, and Sally Walford from RGDC, Regional Development Growth Corporation. And we have also associate researchers, Dr. Stephen Liaros and Dr. Gordon Weiss, both from the University of Sydney. So you could see this team has quite, or comes from multiple institutions, and all with the interest and activities in the circular economy, the subject of this review. So the challenge statement itself, and credit to Ed and team there for putting that up. I think it's been an interesting journey, and New South Wales Circular Precincts and Infrastructure Task Force is working in early stages of place and infrastructure planning to design circular precincts. The task force itself brings together some of Australia's leading industry and government agencies to identify and share best practice on the integration of the circular economy in infrastructure and precinct development. And these come from the Greater Sydney Commission, Western Parkland City Authority, and others. So this rapid review itself on precincts and infrastructure is designed to identify practical approaches and tools to embed circular economy principles within precincts and infrastructure business case processes. A business case itself is a tool. It's a tool used to make informed and evidence-based investment choices. Used across public, private and social benefit sectors, robust business cases help ensure resources are allocated efficiently and they meet objectives and mitigate risks. Business cases that underpin infrastructure decisions have the capacity to significantly shape the form and operation of our future precincts, towns, and cities. Understanding national and international best practice to incorporating and embedding the circular economy principles into business case process will lead to better and more informed business decisions. That's the basis of this notion of this review. So why is this so significant? Well, because this can have a more standardized approach in New South Wales and Australia, enabling projects to be assessed, and because, assessed uniformly, and because precincts and infrastructure developments are also linked to supply chains and resources. Next, we also are joined to Will and I with our colleagues Sally and Stephen. And Sally now will talk to us about business case stages from the New South Wales government.
Hi, thanks, Ali. And yes, I've changed back to Sally instead of Luke. Yes, so thank you, Ali. So the business case process for New South Wales was developed by New South Wales Treasury and is assessed against the New South Wales Gateway Policy. This is an assurance framework to ensure that a project is delivered on the investments put into it. So the development of a business case for New South Wales government is organised along 3 different stages. We have the problem definition, the strategic business case, and the detailed business case. So the problem definition stage is where we outline the need for a case for change and provide context for an investment decision and the high-level cost estimates. So this is the key to identifying the reason for government intervention, and it supports a decision to proceed to further stages of the business case process. At this stage, we identify and define what the business need or opportunity is, the objectives of the intervention, the strategic context, so how does it align with government strategy and priorities, the expected benefits and risks, relevant stakeholders, and the potential strategic response or interventions. From here, we then progress into the strategic business case. And you'll see I've got the arrows going back, and it shows that this is an iterative process. Each time we move on to one stage, the previous stage is kind of redefined or reconfirmed and looked at. So when we go on to the strategic business case, the main purpose of this stage is, as I said, to reconfirm the need for government intervention that was identified at this problem definition stage, as well as to identify and select a list of available and feasible options. So this really provides the decision maker with the information needed to consider whether to further progress the proposal. And this is done through an assessment of whether the proposal is aligned with government and agency strategic plans. So again, does that problem definition really align with what the government's trying to achieve? The demonstration of the best value means of servicing the community needs. So this money that's being invested, is it what the community actually needs? And the development of a preliminary justification for procurement. So if we are going to do this, this is how much money it's going to cost, and do we actually do we need to do this? So it includes a review of the case for change. We get an options analysis in which we get a list of options developed and refined. And then we also assess and narrow down those options through doing a CBA, so a cost benefit analysis, and financial appraisals and financial impact statements of these options. From this stage, we then move on to our detailed business case, or the final business case. And this builds on the options analysis that was undertaken as part of our strategic business case. And it provides a more comprehensive and detailed analysis of the proposal. At this stage, you do a full CBA and financial analysis and financial impact statements. And this is conducted on a short list of options that are being considered for investment. And this basically helps us determine whether the proposal is feasible in the context of the state's financial position. At this stage, we include a list of the preferred options, and it's ranked from highest. And the highest is the one that provides value for money, affordability, and a high probability that it can actually be delivered. At this stage, we also do a commercial analysis, and this is plans of how we would conduct the project, and also a management analysis is done. And this really has plans around how to provide confidence that an economically and financially viable solution is also actually something that we can deliver on, and the risks are manageable, and the benefits can be tracked and realized. Thanks.
So the New South Wales government's business case process represents an opportunity for leverage. And what we'd like to know is, where do you think that leverage could be implemented? That is, you can change a few pages of criteria, principles, and guidance documents that can affect hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in construction and operations. So if you could enter in Zoom's chat function an idea of precincts and infrastructure that could be more circular, whether it's WestConnex or Barangaroo or wherever. Thank you. Okay. Airports, Lismore CBD, universities, water, WSA, the 2032 Olympics and Paralympics, Wollongabba precinct in Queensland, IT, transport infrastructure, electric vehicles, all infrastructure, Port of Newcastle. Any new product, new housing developments. Okay, great. Ali, I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay, so I'll just present that. So just in terms of the overall structure of the report, after the introductory sections, we'd like to set this circular economy transition within the broader context of economic transitions that have been happening over the last couple of decades, particularly as a result of the internet and digital transformation. So we can't think of the circular economy business cases without that understanding of the broader transitions that are happening and now also happening in the energy space and therefore impacting on mobility and various other transitions that are happening. So we set that broader context. Then we talk about the range of different ways in which the circular economy is perceived, because how you interpret or understand the circular economy has an influence on the business case that you seek to develop. And we did some looked at some case studies in that section as well. Then we did an assessment of circular economy literacy, a bit of a survey with numerous executives. And the idea of those two sections was to identify what's possible, where we're at now amongst businesses and industry, and how do we bridge that gap by identifying the success factors, enablers, barriers and gaps, and then put together some recommendations after that. So next slide.
Thank you, Stephen, and I should introduce Stephen. He's our lead author on the project. Thanks, Stephen. And we move to this point around the definitions of the circular economy, or the definition of the circular economy. And when we started the rapid review, we paused for a bit, and we thought it is quite important for us to spend some time and some writing in the report on the circular economy definition, the common language used across the sectors, and the communications that come with that. And this is an area that is quite diverse in terms of definitions. There has been reports out there, quite several, in fact, reviewing all the different comprehensions and understandings of the circular economy around the place. One such report there shown on the slide, conceptualizing the circular economy, an analysis of 114 definitions. And this is, by the way, from 2017, and there's been more reports since then. You could see that, you know, circular economy means 100 things to 100 people, different people, and it's quite diverse. So it is important to recognize that there is a lack of consensus of what is circular economy, and it all really also depends on the culture, nation, and organization. And also the other aspect here is that from these reviews of definitions that, you know, some 2/3 of these definitions focus on waste management, essentially looking at recycling as circular economy. So around the world, there's been, you know, Europe, China, and recently also we've seen in New South Wales definitions being adopted, for example, by the New South Wales government, and that is focused around use of materials as long as possible. So, you know, the challenge here for all of us to understand this comprehension challenge, the education challenge around circular economy, and ensuring that we do move forward with a common language, with a common understanding, at the same time recognizing that situational aspects of circular economy mean that different approaches may be taken by the different definitions that are set. So it's good that this is in the report. It's good to read that, and also hopefully it will be good read for many of you.
Yeah, so just to expand on that idea of the different business cases that arise depending on how you interpret the circular economy. And we've heard in a number of presentations earlier today that we need to think beyond just recycling and think in terms of broader systems. So if you're talking about adjusting the existing system by improving the recycling practices, you're looking at a certain kind of circular economy. But when you're looking at adopting a new paradigm where you're actually striving to create a place or a precinct with zero waste, zero emissions, continual circulation of resources, then that's a completely different business case altogether. So the new economic system is based on the circulation of resources, and we tend to think of the economy about, and we measure production, gross production, but we don't think about distribution and the efficiency of the distribution. And that's what we want to emphasize here. There's also the different scales. So the micro circular economy is really about individual products or individual industries or resources. Meso level is at the precinct scale, where you're integrating a lot of different activities within an individual precinct. And the macro scale is, of course, at the state or national type policies. And you need to harmonise, and that word was used earlier, the industry policies, the precinct policies and the national policies. And there's also different business cases if you're aiming to maximise income for, so your efficiency is designed to increase profit for the businesses. A different business case if you're seeking to minimise costs for all the consumers. Again, different if you're focusing on materials and products as opposed to shifting to services. And so all of these things start to tell us that it's not just about a business case for building things. We have to also think about what not to build, what to expand, what to close down. And this is not about a business case for an individual business or industry. It's about a broader public conversation. And you can see those issues with the energy transition, that if you ask the energy companies, they'll want to extend the life as long as possible for their activities, whereas the broader public interest is to close them down as rapidly as possible and enable new systems to be built. So just go to the next slide.
And Ellie and Will, I might just ask you to sort of unfortunately wrap up here. Obviously, this is the start of a great conversation, whetting the appetite for the report, but I've got strict instructions to keep to time, so maybe you can wrap up on this slide or the next, please, Ellie, Stephen and Will. Thanks.
Yeah, just one of those things was about shutting things down, but also enabling the new pathways between producer and consumer and localizing as much as possible so that distribution, those long supply chains and energy intensive supply chains aren't necessary. I might let you go to the next slide, and maybe Ali, you can wrap up, because
I think
there's a few slides to
get
go.
the presentation with the audience later too, but I think we need to wrap up given the time constraint. Thanks, Ed, and maybe I'll give a few seconds for Will to talk a little bit about the shift in executive decisions and the interviews, the outcomes from those interviews quickly, Will, before we wrap up.
Okay, we were asked to get into the minds of senior executives and the extent to which they take on board circular economy concepts. So we conducted 18 interviews, which would be indicative, but perhaps not definitive, across the private sector, public sector, and nonprofit sector. Next slide. And what they were telling us is there's an army of true believers who've been working on these issues related to sustainability and other industrial ecology for decades now. And they range from people who want to improve recycling to people who want to change the economic system. And they argue for expanding the scope, looking at regeneration, enhancing life in communities. And they're impatient, they're ready to go. They see bottlenecks in government regulations, processes, and incentives. Back to you, Ali.
Thank you, Will. And now I will jump to the findings. The key findings in this review are around the recognition of complexity of the problem, the wicked problem, and all the different silos that currently are ongoing and the need to synergize between them. The different objectives, whether it is industrial objective, maximizing profit, or residential precincts, minimizing operating costs or costs for residents. There is no silver bullet solution. We need an array of strategies across all levels, and including levels of staff, And also we look at all the different implementation opportunities that we've managed to uncover. And we are so pleased to see that the New South Wales government is working so hard in the background on developing these opportunities. Benchmarking is important. And here we also recognize New South Wales Circular benchmark report as an example of a way to realize benefits in the long-term operation of the circular economy. And finally, importantly, we recognize the need for data sharing and data sharing models between businesses and also on the individual level as well. Recommendations, and we will conclude in a few seconds, is to identify place-based planning, design and development. We look at lowering government barriers, enhancing enablers of co-location and the benefits of co-location, especially in industrial precincts. And with that place-based approach is also this kind of sector-based targeting, where different precincts could have foci on different sectors, whether it's recycling or energy and so on. And finally, we make a conclusion here or recommendation around Indigenous concept in business planning, the concept of country. We didn't do a deep dive into that, but we recognize that to be quite an important one that's related to place as well. Secondly, KPIs are super important for being incorporated as circular economy primary objectives in business cases. Thirdly, review planning instruments, the standard instruments used by all councils across New South Wales to embed circular economy into as well as a way forward for these for development to harmonise across councils across the state. And fourthly, digitization, and this was mentioned in the previous session, the importance of data sharing models, modeling, forecasting, and so on, all of that in the same way that smart cities are being thought about, the same way we think about smart precincts and smart infrastructure. These are 4 of the recommendations that we have in the report, and I'm sure you will like to read the rest of the recommendations. With that,
to cut you off there, sorry, I'm getting the gong. But thank you so much. There's wonderful work by you and the whole team. And really, I think a lot of people are going to be looking forward to reading the report, myself included. So we'll jump straight on now to the next presentation. Sorry to hurry things along, but we're joined by Ainsley Simpson, the CEO of the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, fresh from her wonderful conference just a few weeks ago. Ainsley works across the infrastructure industry to advance sustainable outcomes through the deployment and development of the Infrastructure Sustainability Rating Scheme, which he's going to share a bit more on. Welcome, Ainsley. Oh, and Ainsley, you're just muted at the moment. Sorry.
Good morning, Warami everyone. I'm usually joining from Darug country, but today I'm joining you from Gadigal country, and I'd like to acknowledge all the traditional owners of the land and that we meet today, and particularly call out from a circular economy perspective that the past, the present, and the future are connected. Now, this morning, noting that we are a little short of time, I'm going to give you a very short overview about the Infrastructure Sustainability Council for those of you who have not had the pleasure to meet. Importantly, how we're deploying the IS rating scheme to drive circular economy outcomes. Some of the best practice evidence base that we're seeing, and what we hear as critical success factors, not to mention some of those obstacles, challenges, and barriers. So, at the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, our purpose is to ensure that all infrastructure delivers social, cultural, environmental, and economic benefits. And we're doing this in multiple different ways. Importantly, we're doing it across the entire supply chain. The ISC plays host to a variety of members across the value chain, from proponents and government, across all of the top tier design firms, professional services, contractors, and importantly, our manufacturing suppliers and partners.
Ainsley, I don't mean to tempt fate, but we're not seeing your slides in full screen. We're seeing the full outline of them.
Ah, thank you, Ed. Let me see what I can do to replicate that. How about now?
Perfect. Yay, well done.
Excellent. That's great. Now I just need to find the button. Just a sec, I'll be with you shortly. Murphy's Law. You tempted fate, Ed, and now my mouse has disappeared.
This is reminding us of your diverse membership, though. It's a great way of subtly putting the message out to us. Well done. And it's cutting across now. Here you go.
A call to action if you're yet to join us. What we're seeing across sustainability with the general lens and specifically circular economy is that much like safety, we're following a maturity model. So initially, uptake is largely compliance driven when there is a procurement lever, slowly shifting to competitive advantage, and then importantly, landing in a place where we are all deeply committed to driving these outcomes. So a little bit about the IS rating scheme. We are currently celebrating a decade of deployment across Australia and New Zealand. Our rating scheme operates across the full life cycle of infrastructure, starting at the earliest stage with the planning rating, from strategic planning through options analysis, initiation, project development and procurement, into delivery with the design and as-built rating, and then importantly into the O&M stage of assets. When you're undertaking a rating with the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, there are 4 steps. You register with us, you go through a very comprehensive self-assessment process, you enter 2 rounds of verification with our independent verification panel, and then we certify and celebrate the outcomes that have been delivered. Now, we're working across just over $200 billion worth of infrastructure across Australia and New Zealand. We currently have over 200 projects registered. And to answer Will's question a bit earlier, regardless of your size, shape or scale, there is opportunity to drive greater circularity and importantly, all of the co-benefits that occur across the quadruple bottom line. Now, that great uptake is being driven largely through mandating and procurement practices across Australia and New Zealand. And these are some of the thresholds that various state departments and agencies are using for deploying sustainability reporting, including circularity metrics and resource efficiency. Now, the IS rating scheme has been assessed by Stanford University through work requested by Guggenheim and WWF as one of the most comprehensive and rigorous assessment processes in the world. That way, you can rest assured that in terms of a solid evidence base, these outcomes are genuinely quantifiably delivering better outcomes. So what is it that we measure at the ISC? Well, we believe we measure what matters. There are 4 different themes that we cover across the quadruple bottom line. Each of these themes and credits are aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And in terms of circular economy, there are a couple of highlights I'd really like to add. The first is that we've removed the word waste from our technical manual. That's really important because if we're going to drive more circularity thinking, we need to stop thinking about waste and think about resource inputs and outputs. So resource efficiency is where we very explicitly manage the kind of outcomes that we're talking about today. But it's really important to remember that there are additional co-benefits, which if you just look through a very narrow microscope, you may miss. It's important that we have binoculars and long-ranging sight when it comes to matters like circular economy, because there are net zero outcomes through reduced energy and carbon emissions. There are important legacy outcomes because we're building infrastructure for 50 and 100 years. There's stakeholder engagement, there's sustainable procurement, there's local economic development. So it's important to recognize that driving circular economy outcomes unlock many of these other benefits. We just heard about opportunities starting at the early stage with options assessment and business case. So the way in which the scheme works is we have benchmarked what business as usual looks like and only record and reward anything that is beyond compliance. And we've made it really simple to identify what the different levels of performance might be so that you can actually strive for better outcomes in a framework that is right for your project or your asset. So what do some of these outcomes look like? Well, in our 2021 impact report, we've detailed what the evidence base is and what some of the data is showing us. From a circularity perspective, some of the big outcomes are 95% of waste being diverted from landfill. In terms of spoil reuse, which is a real big opportunity when it comes to the land impact of infrastructure, we're looking at 97% of spoil being reused across the sites that we certified in the last year. There are a host of other different opportunities and benefits and many different projects contributing in quite extraordinary ways. I might not go into the detail right now, Ed, but I welcome anyone reaching out so that I can go through some of the project level detail. What we're also seeing is that there are economic benefits to circularity and, importantly, sustainability. At a sustainability level, for every dollar of cost invested in a project delivering an IS rating and measuring their sustainability outcomes, up to $2.40 is returned. Now that's quite a compelling return on investment, and it excludes anything that's more difficult to monetize. But where to from here before we get into the discussions? Well, we've heard already the big levers for us to drive better outcomes are policy, planning, and procurement. And some of the challenges that we regularly hear from our members and those that are embarking on greater sustainability outcomes are the inconsistent policy objectives and regulations. Having tried and tested specifications which are very challenging to change, not necessarily having the most collaborative approaches to innovation, which is directly linked to the way in which we procure infrastructure, where perhaps risk allocation is less well balanced and there are less incentives for providing license to innovate. And then really importantly, improving supply chain capability. Ed, I know we're short for time, so I'm going to call it there and then we can have greater discussion a little bit later.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ainsley. And also congratulations to your Council Alliance 10th anniversary as well. I think that presentation has given us an important reminder of the work you do, and definitely I think there's conversations for all of us to continue with you on that. Next up, Terry Leckie, who is a person who is, I'm sure, very familiar to many of you from his time with the New South Wales Circular and its predecessor, Open Cities. Terry is founder and CEO of Altogether, a multi-utility service provider on a mission to make the world a brighter place, where he's the water industry leader in sustainable development, civil engineering and utility services. Terry, over to you on water and the circular economy.
Thanks, Ed. Can you see the screen all right?
Yes.
Great. So I thought I'd start just with who is Altogether and what do we do in this water space and in this essential services space. So we are currently providing services to about 500 communities across both New South Wales and Queensland, both vertical communities, so high-rise precinct style communities, and then horizontal, so land housing type of new towns. We're currently serving approximately 100,000 people in local water, local power and local data. Some of those communities that you'll see on the Gold Coast, so Q1 and Sol, which are communities that are about sort of 300 to 500 customers, about sort of 600 to 1,200 people. Brisbane Sky Tower is a lot larger than that, so it's about 1,100 customers, about 2,500 people. Land housing, two examples here. One's Huntley, which is a new town in the Hunter Valley. It's going to be about 20,000 people, of which about 700 or 2,000 people are connected so far. And then the Gables, which is in the northwest sector, which is about 3,500 people connected so far out of 15,000. And we provide, water, energy, and data services. So how do we achieve this? What's the key to circular economy, and what are the things that we provide? So the key is local community networks. So these are networks which we might call embedded networks, but essentially they're networks. They might be drinking water networks, they might be recycled water networks, wastewater networks, electricity networks, data networks that are contained locally, that are owned locally and are contained locally. And what they do is they allow us to capture resources. So it might be for wastewater, we are able to capture that resource within the community. Then we're able to transform that resource and then deliver it back within that community. So the key to being able to make economics work, to be able to apply technology, is to have for the community just the control of the network itself. Then what we do is we overlay that with, you know, local customer platforms. So what's a local approach to how we communicate, how we service, and then what about those programs that we might have with the community? So those are, you know, educational programs, you know, linkages with the schools and the universities that surround or are encompassed within these communities. Just back to, you know, where does the circular economy start? So we have to have, you know, balance for each of these. So sustainability is about balancing. The ecologically sustainable is about, you know, leaving a better tomorrow. That's probably the easier one. Social sustainability, do people want this? Do they embrace it? That's probably the next one that's easiest. And then there's the economic sustainability. So how do you take these small communities and how do you make it economically sustainable for all parties? And that's this thing that we've been focusing on for the last 10 to 15 years. Give you some examples. So Central Park is where we serve them as a water community. So we offset the demand for drinking water by taking all of the wastewater, all of the waters that are available within the community, capturing those waters, taking them down into the basement of this building that you see there, and then transforming that water, so treating that water and producing a couple of qualities of water depending on the usage. And so and then we recycle that back to that community for toilet flushing, clothes washing, irrigation, water features and so forth. And then we capture it again. So it comes back into our facility, and that includes even the green wall water is returned to our facility. We have access to stormwater, so stormwater detention, rainwater that's collected from the roofs, car park drainage water. So we sort of capture all of the water that's available within this community, and then we make it available for that. In this precinct, they have a highly efficient district cooling system, and that district cooling system uses quite a lot of water, and so we produce a high quality water that makes this usage more efficient, and that is a separate pipe network that is within this community. So this takes up a whole city block, and we have three water delivery pipelines. One's for drinking water, one's for general use recycled water, the other is for high quality cooling tower makeup. I'll move on just not only in water, but we are, you know, delivering energy. And in this case, it's about how do you reduce demand on the regional network? How do you create sustainability? And in this case, we have provided solar panels on the roof of this high rise. So this is a high rise above 8 stories community. And we've been able to produce enough electricity that it provides, you know, a gigawatt hour of free electricity for that community, and that electricity is used for all of the base services, for all of the lighting that's used within the park areas around this, for all of the sort of public, the community amenities, and then that is essential, because what that does is it reduces the strata fees for that community, and those strata fees are paid by the owners of property within those communities. But therefore, does it get passed on as rent, you know, rental abatement necessarily for the tenants? No, it doesn't. You tend to just provide market rates. So what we also do as part of this this system is that we're able to provide a reduction in usage costs for electricity, so that the tenants within this community also get a benefit. And then, you know, just in the past sort of year or so, there's been a increase in electric vehicles within this community, and so now about, you know, overlaying electric vehicle charging and how can that be overlaid. And that's just sort of an example, because we have the ability to control the network within the community, then we're able to overlay technology as it comes along. We provide hot water systems, we provide heating systems, we provide chilling systems within this community as well. So what are some of the other things that we see as the benefits of circular economy, of having these systems that we're seeing within our communities across those 500 communities? So what we're seeing is that we're actually able to provide jobs for people within those communities. And so we have communities where we have caretakers for our water plants, we have irrigation that needs to be managed and maintained, and so we have irrigators, we have local plumbers and electricians that help us to maintain these systems. We tend to try and we manage to keep the money within that community. So this is a local community that pays its fees and charges to a local business that then spends money on businesses within this community. So you tend to keep that money within the community. Now, these guys aren't paying any more than they would, and in fact, they're saving. But what's the benefit is that all that money stays within that community. Sorry, the majority of that money stays within the community. It also then supports the businesses with the community. And often what we find is we're able to create businesses with local people within those communities to be able to support that community and make it robust. And then we provide services to surrounding communities. So you're talking about UTS. So in Central Park, we go across the road to provide recycled water to UTS. In other areas, we're able to go outside of the community and provide energy services and water services for those. So one of the keys, sorry.
To wrap up on the slide, we're just
no, you're done. That's fine.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks very much, Terry. And yeah, look, that's definitely some of those projects, the ones we've been diving into a bit deeper in the task force as well. So I'd encourage you to come along to task forces if you want to engage a bit more with that and some of the other projects that our members have underway. So well done, Terry. Thank you. Now, last we have James Dorney from Tomra Cleanaway. James joined as CEO in mid-2018, shortly after the commencement of the New South Wales Container Deposit Scheme. Prior to his current role, James held a variety of senior leadership roles across a range of industries, including CEO of Auto Care Services and Group General Manager of Patrick Port Logistics. Over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Ed. For those who aren't familiar with the New South Wales Container Deposit Scheme Return and Earn, on the screen that you'll see in front of you is just a brief snapshot of some of the achievements since scheme commencement, and has really generated a significant range of environmental, economic and social benefits, which are listed on the screen there. I suppose the headline story there is that the scheme has collected over 7 billion containers since commencement in December 2017. So really that's 7,000 million containers, drink containers, that might otherwise have joined the litter stream or ended up as landfill. So breaking that down, it essentially involves a run rate of around 2 billion containers being collected on an annual basis, and that equates to about 6 million containers a day being collected across New South Wales. And in terms of circularity, it's pleasing to report that all of these containers are being put towards high value recycling applications. So the key call out in the slide in front of us is around that annual rate of return, and it compares very, very favourably to the rate of return which was experienced pre-scheme commencement, which sat at around 32%. So we've seen a doubling of the rate of return for eligible containers in New South Wales since 2017. On the screen there, it again references the fact that about 3 in 4 adults in New South Wales have participated, and it's also generated a significant amount of jobs across the state, built across a platform of data and technology. In terms of the infrastructure, on the screen there is a summary of the 4 main types of collection points across New South Wales. We have reverse vending machines, reverse vending centres, automated depots, and over-the-counter collection points. And you'll see it's a significant network numbering over 620 collection points across the entire state. In terms of the infrastructure, one of the key characteristics of the New South Wales scheme is that every single bottle and returned, every single drink container returned, is scanned. ensuring that there is a very rich stream of data, which Ali Abbas mentioned earlier as being something that's very, very important to be able to measure your performance. But importantly, another hallmark of the infrastructure in the scheme is that it generates a very, very clean stream of commodity, because essentially the different commodity types are separated at source as a rule, which means that the glass is separated from the other commodity types, which leads to a very, very high class of commodity being generated, which is in high demand in the end recycling markets. And as I mentioned before, these are being put to circular outcomes. The New South Wales Container Deposit Scheme Return and Earn started life as a litter reduction scheme in line with some of the Premier's priorities, but has since become a scheme which demonstrates what's available in terms of circular outcomes as the focus increasingly shifts to circularity and the importance of resource recovery. In that space, I mentioned before earlier that we've now recently celebrated over 7 billion drink containers being returned through Return and Earn. This has generated over 700,000 tonnes of commodity being captured since scheme commencement in terms of eligible containers being returned. And putting that in perspective, that equates to about 2.1 billion glass bottles, over 2 billion plastic drink containers, of which the vast majority of those are PET, and nearly 3 billion aluminium drink containers being returned since scheme commencement. So the numbers are really quite staggering and going to the importance of a well-designed, accessible network, which is delivering very, very high rates of return as a result of very high rates of participation by New South Wales citizens. In terms of the circular outcomes, it's very, very pleasing to report what is actually happening with the commodity that's being generated. As I mentioned before, the infrastructure that the scheme has been built about has shown itself to be quite resilient in terms of the challenges that have been faced, not just in New South Wales, but across the country in recent years. In New South Wales, obviously, we've had the concerns around COVID, but likewise a terrible run with floods and bushfires. But throughout all of this, the network has remained operational and has continued to deliver in terms of collecting containers and delivering those to the end recycling market. So what we see in front of us is a summary of those three key commodity types that are collected. As I said, one of the hallmarks of the infrastructure design is that the product is separated at source. So the glass is separated generally at the point of return and enters a completely different network in terms of the network that manages the glass. So it's delivered largely into New South Wales glass for processing, with some overflow going into South Australia, but essentially all of the glass being collected through New South Wales CDS is being put to what's called bottle-to-bottle applications, being turned back into glass bottles and being reused. And for example, for those in New South Wales, you might have recently seen some of Busy's advertising stating that the content of recycled glass in their bottles in New South Wales has increased from 33 to 43% recently. And much of that glass is being generated into Busy on the basis of the New South Wales Container Deposit Scheme. In relation to PET, which is the vast majority of plastics that are generated through the Return and Earn scheme, just recently we, and some people on this call may have been in attendance, the official opening of the circular plastics plant in Albury, New South Wales. This is a plant where all of the PET is now being directed from the New South Wales scheme. It's a joint venture between Asahi, Coca-Cola, Pact, with Cleanaway having a minority shareholding also. And what we're seeing here is that the PET is being fed into that facility and it's being turned back, essentially back into either flake or pellets for eventual reuse in food grade plastics. And what we're seeing is that as a result of this, it's a very, very pleasing and positive development. We are seeing bottles being back on the shelf, being delivered through this circular economy in as little as 8 weeks, from receipt of the bottle back on the shelf as a recycled plastic bottle in as little as 8 weeks. And finally, the aluminium, again, all being returned to circular applications. As a result of a lack of onshore reprocessing capability, this currently gets sent offshore where it's where it's in high demand. It's obviously a globally traded product and is finding markets all around the world, again, given the high value and the high quality streams that are being generated as a result of the scheme design. So in summary, The infrastructure that has been delivered has allowed for a convenient and accessible and importantly resilient network across the state. Generates a very, very rich stream of data and in real time, which allows us to understand what is going on and provide that information to all key stakeholders to understand and appreciate the performance across the scheme. We'd like to think that Return and Earn in New South Wales is a very, very positive case study in what's available to drive circular outcomes on the basis of a well-designed and considered scheme, leading to very high levels of participation and leading to positive outcomes in terms of the capture of commodity and the eventual reuse of that commodity.
Excellent. Thanks very much, James. What a fascinating story, and it's something that I think in New South Wales we're very sort of proud of, and the learnings that can be shared with other jurisdictions in Australia and internationally. The rates of litter reduction, but also the donations to charity is another side of it, which I think is quite an incredible part of the story as well. So a lot more to deep dive into there as well. And I see there's a few questions in the chat as well, looking for a few more details.